Shalom and welcome to Messianic Delaware. My name is Jerry Mitchell, and I will be teaching this afternoon, or whenever you're listening to this. As I recorded, it's in the afternoon. Understanding the New Covenant. If you're familiar and you've been kind of keeping track of where we've been in Matthew chapter 5 and chapter 6. But this particular week, we are going to visit another church just down the street. They're having the folks from Answers in Genesis come and speak to them about how important Genesis is. And we kind of decided to go down there and, I decided to go down there and join them. I enjoy the teaching from Answers in Genesis, and sometimes teachers need to be taught too. But I wanted to give another teaching this week, and it's something I've been wanting to look at, and I had some confirmation of this teaching not very long ago. One of the other folks that regularly comes, Wesley Scott, taught this as part of a series he did for Hope Family Fellowship, and there was someone there that just kind of confirmed everything that we've been looking at this. And I wanted to do this for Messianic Delaware. I've been wanting to do it, and this just seemed like the appropriate time to look at understanding the New Covenant. And when we talk about this, we need to know where this comes from. Because a lot of people today, they will point back to Jeremiah 31:31, and that reads, "Behold, the days come, says Jehovah, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." And in verse 32, it says, "It's not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them took them by the hand and brought them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they broke, although I was a husband to them." So that's where this comes from, this new covenant, this concept of God doing something different, something new. But it's not like the covenant he made with their fathers. Now, to understand the new covenant, we have to understand what is the old covenant, and is it still being enforced? Does the old covenant still exist, or has it been replaced already? Now, this is going to surprise some of you, and some of you may be upset with this, because we know the old covenant as the Ten Commandments. Let that sink in for just a moment. The old covenant is the Ten Commandments. In Exodus 24:8, Moses took blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, "Behold, the blood of the covenant, which Jehovah has made with you concerning all these words." Now, between when Jehovah came down on Mount Sinai in chapter 20 and verse 24, Moses goes up and gets basically the parameters of how to do the Ten Commandments. Okay, everything that's going to be laid out. Now, there's some things you got to not get confused about, okay? Because the old covenant, the Ten Commandments, is not the sacrificial system that you're probably thinking the old covenant is. The sacrificial system was instilled by Jehovah because we violated, like 10 minutes after it was done, well, not quite, but very close, very near after it was done, we violated that original blood covenant. That's when God said, "Stand back, Moses, I'm going to kill everybody." And Moses said, "No, count me with them, even though I was in your presence talking to you. I'm just like them." And God found another way. The sacrifices were simply a bookmark. They are a constant reminder that because we violated the blood covenant at Exodus 24, which was made because we said we'd do everything that God said we would do, and we immediately messed it up. We transgressed, we violated, however you want to say it, we blew it. Then the sacrificial system was necessary as a constant reminder that blood was owed by the offending party. God is not the offending party, we are. So now that we know what the old covenant is there really any need for me to talk about the new one? Because I think it's pretty obvious we're still under the old one, okay? But let's look, just to make sure. Let's see what we've got. What are the parameters of the new covenant? Well, Jeremiah 31:33 reads, "But this shall be the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Jehovah. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts. I will be their God and they will be my people." Now, the covenant with the house of Israel is putting the law, God's instructions, in their soul, in their inward parts. Now, that comes from the Hebrew word kereb, meaning inward, in the middle. Heart, from the Hebrew word labam, means your inner man, your mind, your will, your heart. So not only will this concept be on our hearts, but it will be on our minds. We will be consistently thinking of it. And I think I can safely say that's not happened yet, okay? Because that's not all. That's not all. Verse 34, "They shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them," meaning the youngest, "to the greatest of them," meaning the oldest. "And I will forgive their iniquity, and I remember their sin no more." Now, from the very young to the very old, everyone will know. Everyone will know. Can I say that again? Everyone will know who Jehovah is. Not everyone knows that today. Not everybody today knows who God is. Not everybody today has the law written on their heart. This should be pretty obvious in the society that we live in the world that we live in. Okay? Now, why mention Israel and Judah separately? Well, it's because this time the northern tribes have already been captured. Okay? Remember Jeremiah 16:16, "Behold, I will send for many fishers, thus saith Jehovah, and they shall fish for them. And after that I'm going to send hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain, from every hill, and out of the holes in the rocks." I really like Jeremiah 31:10 and 11 also. He just keeps saying this. "Hear the word of Jehovah, O you nations, and declare it, even in the far-off islands, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. For the Lord hath redeemed Jacob, and ransomed him from the hand of him that was stronger than he." Remember Isaiah 40, verse 11, "He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs to his arms and carry them to his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are young." Okay? Judah is going to be exiled shortly. But right now, in Jeremiah, the northern tribe, what we consider the northern tribes, have already been dispersed. That's why he mentions them separately. It's not because he's going to make a separate covenant with Israel and with Judah. It's all going to be the same covenant, but he's comparing them separately because one's already gone, one's getting ready to be exiled. Okay? So what other verses reveal these new covenant concepts? Well, if you look in Isaiah 43:19, "Behold, I will do a new thing." Okay, let's stop right there because we have to pay attention to the tenses in these. Even in Hebrew, it's future tense. "Behold, I will do," at some point in the future, "a new thing." Now, it shall or will spring forth. Will you not know it? In other words, he's saying, you're not going to miss it. It will be impossible for anyone to miss what's going to happen. And he continues, I will even make a way in the wilderness and the rivers and in the desert. You're not going to be able to miss it when this new covenant takes place. It's going to be big. Acts 17:19. They looked at him and brought him into Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new doctrine, wherefore thou speak, is. Now, this is when Paul looks around and he sees this altar to an unknown God, and he begins to teach them about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is completely separate from this new covenant concept, but a lot of people get this confused because it talks about new doctrine. And I wanted to include that in here because you've got to understand it's different. It's different. You got to keep the concepts in their proper categories when you're talking about biblical things, because that's where the confusion comes in. We see a word similar to this word over here. It's like delivery and salvation. Two different concepts, two different things. So keep your concepts in their proper categories, and it helps considerably. Okay? But even in Isaiah, talking about Judah, I will do a new thing in the future, and everybody's going to know it. You're not going to miss it. Okay? Hebrews chapter 8. Paul practically quotes word for word from Jeremiah 31. But look at it very closely. If you look at verse 7, the word covenant has been added. Okay? When you add a word like that, it changes everything. It changes literally everything. And when you start changing these things, confusion reigns. Confusion reigns because Paul is speaking in chapter 8 about the Levitical priesthood. He's comparing Yeshua as Melchizedek, our high priest forever. And in verse 6, but now has he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. Now, be careful, because in verse 7, for if the first had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. Not speaking of a covenant, but of a priesthood. Not speaking of a covenant, but of a priesthood. And the same follows suit when you get down to verse 13. In that he says, anew has made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. Again, speaking of the priesthood, not of the 10 Commandments. Okay? Now in verse 9, Paul is explaining he's starting to get into the differences between what the Torah is, our instructions, those first 10 Commandments and everything around them, and he's talking about the need for the sacrifices. Remember, our violation because we failed to do what God said to do. And in chapter 9, verses 13 and 14, for if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of heifer sprinkling on the unclean sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot, he was perfect, to God. He was perfect, meaning he never sinned. Okay? He never violated the covenant. That's why he was able to do it. Purge your conscience from the dead works to serve the living God. Not talking about, now the dead works here is referring to the sacrifices. Okay? He is not talking about loving your neighbor and following God's instructions. You got to get over that. All right? Because the first covenant's still the Ten Commandments. Now, it's a shame that Paul didn't reference Daniel, or maybe he did and somebody took it out. I don't know. Because in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26 and 27, after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Speaking of the crucifixion. And the people of the prince then shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now there's a lot of different levels here, and this part of this has been done, part of it's yet to be done. And the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. See, that's how you know it's going to continue. Unto the end. We're not at the end yet. Verse 27, and he shall confirm the covenant. Who's the he? The Messiah. It speaks back to the Messiah. And the Messiah will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblations to cease. Now, if you understand when he was crucified and when he was resurrected, you know that happened in the middle of the week. Gabriel, who we learn from Luke, stands in the presence of Jehovah himself, tells this to Daniel a few hundred years before the event. Daniel knew what was going to happen 300 to 400 years before it happened. Okay? He's going to cause the sacrifice and the oblations to cease. I don't know how much simpler you can get. The Messiah himself is the one who caused the sacrifice and the oblations to cease. Now, up to this point, we've seen several verses that refer to a new covenant, which will, at some point in the future, replace the old covenant from Mount Sinai. And I know what some of you are probably wondering. Some of you may be screaming, what about the Last Supper? What do we do? What's it mean? If we look at Matthew 26, 28, 29, Mark 14, 24, 25, Luke 22, 20, all describe the remarks of Yeshua. For this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink it henceforth of this fruit of the vine until the day I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom. Now, there's a lot of problems with these translations. Okay? No first century Jewish person, no Jewish person in the 21st century would ever use the phrase, now drink my blood. It's a violation of the Torah. You cannot do it. If he did it, he's not the Messiah. Plain and simple. The problem is in the translation. The problem with it is in the way it's remarked. The problem is in the way we understand it sometimes too. Okay? The use of a negative conjunction in Matthew, and it's confirmed in Mark, he will not drink it again until we get to the kingdom, the marriage supper of the Lamb, means that's when he's going to confirm this new covenant. Okay? It represents his blood. It represents a new covenant, but it's not in effect until some point in the future when he will confirm the new covenant. When he confirms the new covenant, there will be no mistake. Just like it says in Jeremiah. No mistake about it. And what happens after that's the Messianic reign. What does the Messianic reign look like? Isaiah 66, 23 and 24. It shall come to pass that from one new moon to another and from one Shabbat to another shall all flesh come and worship before me, says Yehovah. And they will go out. They will leave and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. When you leave, you're going to walk out and you're going to step over the rotting corpses of the people who rejected Jehovah. Can I say that again? When you step out of your worship places, you're going to step over the rotting corpses of the people who rejected Jehovah, because their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they will be an aberration. We will abhor that. We will despise the people who rejected the Almighty. That's one aspect of the Messianic kingdom. Zechariah 14:16 shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem, everyone who rejected Jehovah, shall even go up year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles? What? To keep the Feast of Tabernacles? But that's in the Old Covenant. Why would we do that in the Messianic kingdom? Because it's still in force. It's not something new we're going to do. We're going to continue even through the Messianic kingdom. This gets even better, folks. The parameters from Jeremiah 31 are not met yet. Isaiah 45:23, I've sworn by myself. In other words, Jehovah says, as Jehovah lives, the word is gone out of my mouth in righteousness and shall not return, that unto me every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. That's not happened yet. When the Messiah comes to reign on the earth, there's not going to be any doubt over who the Creator is or who the Messiah is. It's going to happen. Okay? Going to happen. According to Scripture, this new covenant, or the covenant made at Mount Sinai, will still be enforced during the Messianic reign. According to Scripture, the covenant made at Mount Sinai will be enforced till the end of the Messianic reign. So when does this new covenant begin? Isaiah 65:17, behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come to mind. You're not even going to think about this world that we live in anymore. It's going to be so much better. It's going to be so fantastic. There won't even be a remembrance of this place. The people, you're going to know, but this place, nope, it's gone. 2 Peter 3:12, nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness, where the law is written on our hearts, on our most inward parts. On our most inward parts. You catching all this? Revelation 3:12, he that overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and I will write upon him a new name. We not only get a new name, we get a new heart, just like it says in Ezekiel 11:18 and 36. How do we get this confused? It's all right here. Time after time after time, reinforcement after reinforcement, witness after witness, and we can't get it right. Hopefully, now you're starting to understand. Hopefully. Because guess what? Revelation 21:1-2. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. We're not going to remember them anymore, according to Isaiah. There was no more sea, and I, John, saw the holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And down in verse 5, he that sat upon the throne said, behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, speaking to John now, write, for these words are true and faithful. The new covenant will not be A new will not be enforced until the old one is written on our hearts. And this new one takes place. It may be confirmed at the marriage supper of the Lamb, but it actually is enforceable after heaven and earth pass away and the new heaven and the new earth, the new heaven and the new earth are made. God recreates everything. Revelation 22:14. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. Let's go over that just a little bit. Happy are they that do his commandments, not those that think good thoughts, but actually do his commandments. That they, the people who do his commandments, have the right to the tree of life, which is in the New Jerusalem. They have the right to the tree of life, and they can enter through the gates into the New Jerusalem. You see, there's no biblical support for the concept that we're currently under the new covenant. It's not. It's not even enforceable yet. But the Ten Commandments are. Everything that goes around them are. You know, this whole concept of you will not put any other gods in the face of Jehovah. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. The death penalty for our violations of the current blood covenant have been paid, but we're still obligated to that covenant. The debt's been paid. You owe it now to Yeshua. He paid it. But we're still obligated to follow that set of instructions. We're still obligated to follow that set of instructions, to honor that set of instructions. We are still obligated and obliged to do the things that the Almighty instructed us to do at Mount Sinai. Now, I know this teaching has been different than some you might have seen. But when you put these things together in one place, and you look at the witnesses that are already in Scripture, my, how things just kind of lighten up. How we can see if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. If our hearts are open to what the Almighty is telling us, then we can understand the things that He has already spoken. So many people are looking for something new, and all they have to do is understand it's in the future. We are still obligated to the original covenant that was made. Now, very quickly, I want to say, not everyone's obligated to that. You can reject it. You are totally free to reject it. Not a problem. He will let you walk away. Just remember Isaiah 66. The people who actually do the commandments, when they leave their places of worship in the millennial reign with the Messiah, they're going to be stepping over the rotted corpses of everyone who rejected Yehovah. Everyone who said, no, I don't want to do it your way. I want to do it my way. Those are the ones who will lay in the mud and rot and be looked at for 1,000 years by those who said, yes, I believe Yehovah is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I believe He did create the world. I believe He did provide Yeshua to pay the death penalty so I didn't have to. The new covenant's in the future. We're still under the old. I think we should do our best to live by it. Shalom.